I have a very distinguished panel up here, and I want to introduce them to you, but let me start by saying, first of all, a thank you to Stuart for his research on regulation, which is really thought-provoking. I know at the beginning when he asked you how many people knew about regulations, hardly anyone did. I'm sure it was kind of a surprise to see that not only are there regulations, but they're really going to be affecting us as IT leaders, not just cybersecurity leaders. So thank you, Stuart, for all the backup on that, the information on that. But now we're going to turn to a little bit more, I guess, different topic about security. Our topic is about AI and security implications that it's bringing to the forefront. One of our colleagues of Stuart's and mine mentioned to us recently that AI is sucking the air out of every other topic today. You can't have a conference without talking about AI. And that's true both in the technology world, but also in the security world. So some of us may even already have AI fatigue. We're hearing so much about it. We're kind of tired of hearing about it. But one thing's certain, we really haven't figured out how to manage the security implications of AI. So I'm really excited this morning to have a distinguished group of panelists up here to talk about that. We're going to start with some discussions about what cyber resilience means to them, and then go into how AI is impacting what they're seeing either as a CIO or with clients that are working in this space. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much. We did do a prep call last week, so we kind of all know what each other's points of view are, but I'm going to ask them to just start by introducing themselves, tell us what cyber resilience means to them so that we're kind of grounded in where they're coming from, and then tell me what you see as AI's role in creating cyber resilience. So Fahim, do you want to start us out?
Sure. Good morning. Fahim Siddiqui. I'm CIO for the Home Depot. And really, as we cater to our communities with more than 2,300 stores nationwide, we're an essential service provider. And we have to be there at 5:30, 5:45 a.m. when the contractors are there to pick up the goods and to serve our communities and everybody. But it also provides cyber criminals many vectors to get into our systems. Right? Each store is a potential place for entry, as is the cloud and so on. So for us, cyber resilience really is to be prepared to detect any zero-day events, to be able to respond to them, and to make sure that the enterprise really can deliver what they need to our communities and to our customers.
Awesome. JSB, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelly Brown. I'm a partner at McKinsey, and I co-lead our technology risk and resilience work. Cyber resiliency. So from the point of view of our clients, much as Fahim is indicating, a lot of it is about being able to respond and recover very, very quickly. I think as we think about AI, that starts to evolve and evolve very, very quickly because it's still a very new technology. While the potential is there, we need to think about it both from the proactive lens, how do we manage the risks associated, but also starting to think about where we can use AI to actually improve our security and risk posture.
Thank you. Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jeffrey Wheatman. I am a Senior Vice President, and I have a totally made-up title, Cyber Risk Evangelist, for Black Kite. We're a third-party risk intelligence vendor. For me, resilience is sort of the natural evolution from business continuity planning, which talked a lot about what happens if your data center falls into a hole. But it's got to be much more granular than that now, and I think my colleagues have articulated it. We need to be able to keep our businesses going no matter what happens, big or small. And I think with regard to AI, and JSP and I were talking about this before we walked in, AI is like the new buzzword. Everybody's talking about it, but I don't really think a lot of people have a full understanding of what it means, what the impacts are, and where it's actually going to go. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of our insight and get you all thinking differently about this challenge.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So let me start with you for the next question, and then we'll go down the line here. Let's start with a discussion of the new cybersecurity risks and threats that we need to prepare for. So we know the bad guys, as Stuart likes to say, the bad guys are getting badder faster than the good guys are getting better. And we know we have to guard every window and every door, and they only have to find one crack in our armor. So as the evangelist for Black Kite, you're a big vendor in the security space. I'd love for you to share the ways you're seeing AI changing the threat landscape.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's really three things we need to think about. First of all of your businesses are using AI, whether they're telling you about it or not. Your vendors are all using AI, whether they're telling you about it or not. And we need to figure out what the implication is for us on our businesses, because as defenders, if we don't know what our businesses are doing, it makes it much harder for us to solve the problem. I think the second aspect is the bad actors are using AI. They have access to all the tools we do, and then a bunch we don't. They have no ethics or morals. We have to. They can break the law. We cannot. So we need to understand what they are doing. I always tell people, think like an attacker. And then the third part is we as protectors have to look at what the landscape looks like as far as are our security tools using cutting edge technology to be able to help protect us. And I think it's an ongoing challenge. I always tell people, ask your vendors these three questions. What do you do now with AI that you couldn't do before? What do you do better? And what do you do with AI that your competitors don't? And if your vendors can't answer those questions, at least one of them, you have to think about whether in fact they're using AI or they're using AI.
Okay, JSB, let's turn to you. You have clients in all types of industries. How is AI changing their attack surfaces?
Yeah, one of the things we are seeing is that if you had immature processes around risk, or you had control gaps, AI is going to exacerbate it, right? So one of the things we see, for example, is that you're bringing in, for example, a Gen AI-enabled third-party product, right? Name any familiar one. You want to improve the productivity. Well, if you did not have the right data controls or you did not have the right access controls, and these LLMs are exposed to that data, well, your current gaps in those data controls are now going to be exploited and can be used as an attack surface, right? So it's really, really important for all of our clients. What we're seeing is that your existing risk control frameworks are able to be evolved to understand what new risks or what exacerbated risks can exist with the advent of this technology.
So are you seeing mostly through Gen AI applications, or are you seeing other AI applications?
So it's all AI, but what you see with Gen AI is that it's a bit of a hockey stick of adoption. And then the way how we're seeing these LLMs are learning can kind of exacerbate what you see in a way that we're seeing more pronounced than we would have seen in earlier applications. I wouldn't say the risk is new, but you're just seeing a faster adoption curve, which makes it more prominent.
So there's something about the adoption of AI that's changing the way we need to be thinking about
Exactly.
the attack surface.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Fahim, you're the CIO of a really large company. What are your biggest concerns about how AI is increasing the risks and vulnerability your company's facing? What are you thinking? What's your biggest concern?
So as we looked at cyber and cyber resilience to start with, there was always this factor of, well, at some point the human can help make a better judgment call, protect us, or insert the human in the middle for multi-factor, for instance. Well, with Gen AI, and especially what we saw, just the most recent OpenAI tool that's coming out, ChatGPT 4o, it works at near human response speed in multimodal. So now what you have is an adversary that, whether it's speaking to a person or speaking to systems, can calculate and respond in near human-like fashion and as quickly. So now we have to reimagine in a lot of ways how we think about social engineering, how we think about actually sharing our credentials, and really what are the different places of ingress and egress that the attacker have. And it's not really about that's just the doors and the windows. They might pop up from the ceiling, or they might drill a hole through the... And to protect against that, we started with cyber maturity and looked at the NIST framework, and most of us have gone through that exercise. Now we spend a lot more time worrying about really what are the different risk vectors that can compromise our business, and then what are the places of where we put those controls in place and where we have zero-day detection. And yes, it is getting much harder every day.
So if it's the sort of the human factors, you're saying with AI, it's getting harder and harder to detect if, in fact, what we're seeing is a real person or a deep fake of some sort.
Indeed.
Yeah. How are you preparing your organization to deal with that?
So it again comes back to that judgment and to understand what the controls are. You have to start with securing the identity. We truly believe that if we can secure the identity and know who's who and who's where, and what rights do they have, be it people or processes or systems or networks, and really profiling that information within our networks, within our servers, so that anything, any moment, anything unusual happens, we identify it, we contain it, and we resolve it. And that's where we are putting our efforts in.
So those are technology solutions, putting technology in place that will identify and perhaps surround and stop a vulnerability. Are there human factor solutions, human side solutions you're looking at also?
So the way I say it is like, you got to help people not do the stupid.
I love that. I'm putting that in my culture research.
And good luck with that.
But more importantly, it is about that awareness. So we actually have, as part of our cyber team, we have one team that is entirely dedicated to educating, testing, informing our people what to do, what not to do, and even to go to those tests where don't click on that email.
So let's extend this just beyond just the human factor, but AI is also giving you the opportunity to create new cyber defenses. Fahim, are you investing in any particular defense mechanisms or defense technologies or opportunities with AI, using it now not as a potential threat vector, but as a potential layer of defense?
So a lot of times we now conflate Gen AI with overall AI and machine learning. And we believe that it's far too early yet for Gen AI to be a core pillar of cyber preparedness. However, any given cyber tool of magnitude that we utilize has deep machine learning in there. And I'm not trying to put anyone in there, but we do a lot of work with Palo Alto Networks. And really, beyond the firewalls and everything that they provide, all the advanced capabilities that we have deployed with them have machine learning in there. And it's all about learning the behavior and learning what traffic, what information, what use is moving from where to where. Because that's the place we can actually incorporate this. And that goes on from one to so on to actually looking at tools which we have deployed on our endpoints. And then they actually learn what is happening at that one endpoint, and it's all AI based. And then they can stop it, contain it, and manage it.
So AI as a tool for collecting data, interpreting data, finding that needle in the haystack.
Every day.
Yeah, awesome. Jeff, let's bring you in here. Working for a vendor here, what are you seeing as the ways AI can make you more secure and more resilient?
So I think the first thing that's really important is AI is not a tool, it's not a platform. It's a feature and it's a function. It's an accelerator. And as Fahim talked about, there are lots of vendors out there that are integrating AI. And I'm sure all of you know this, but AI is not new. It's been around for decades. ChatGPT has sort of pushed it to the top. I always use my mom as an example. If my mom is talking about a technology, it is beyond mainstream at that point. And my mom is asking me about this. So I think that from the protection side, I think AI is really good at pattern recognition, which is something humans are inherently bad at. AI is really good at getting rid of the background noise, of which we see an unbelievable amount, and it's growing like crazy. So I think that we need to focus on the vendors that are leveraging AI, that are looking at all of the different AI capabilities to be able to make the humans more efficient. Fahim said it, right? Humans and AI need to work side to side. I have a presentation that I do called, will AI be your next CISO? And the answer is not a chance, and I think that's a world I don't want to live in. But I think we need to figure out how can we optimize these capabilities and how can we leverage them in our, not just in our security landscape, but in our IT landscape, our operational landscape. Our partners are using it, they're embedding it, and we don't know about it. So from the defense perspective, we need to think about how can we leverage this to be bigger, better, faster, more, and not just buy it because it seems like a good idea, or maybe the vendor, took us out to a nice lunch at a steakhouse, right?
Or had a good table in the next room.
Yes.
Visit the vendors in the next room. It's because of them that we're here. All right, JSP. So you talked, when we were doing our prep, you talked about your concern of over-dependence. Tell us what you mean by that and what you're seeing happening there.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing is there's a lot of applications of AI where it is meant to be in the loop to help the human be more productive, right? Exactly as Jeff is alluding to. The consequence of that is that there can be an over-reliance or over-dependence on that AI to have the right answer. And over time, yes, there's a high level of accuracy that we might see, but many organizations are relying on a human in the loop, some level of human intervention to be able to see, is this content the right content? Is it fair? Is it, respecting our IP rights? Is it making sure that it is unbiased in every way? And we're using humans as controls. But inevitably, we all start to rely on the technology's correctness or accuracy. Therefore, the control is not effective, right? And that is where we can see a real problem. And even though you're training an organization and saying, this is what you need to look for, over time, like many of the devices we have, we trust the output, right? Our technology gives us, and that's an inevitable risk.
Yeah, actually, I can see that with like Google and search right now.
Exactly.
We all carry encyclopedias in our pocket.
Exactly.
And in the middle of dinner, when you have a question and nobody knows the answer, everybody pulls out their phone to check the answer.
It's a classic social media problem, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to trust what output is being put forth to you. So what's the validation in that?
And so you're seeing AI ratcheting that up to some extent because the technology is more comprehensive.
Exactly as Fahim was alluding to, it starts to get better and better in terms of more human-like, human-sounding, especially if it is kind of within the organizational walls. You're going to trust the output that comes from that tool, right? And therefore, you're going to end up in a situation where your individual who is meant to act as a kind of line of defense fails to do so.
Yeah, and actually, I'm doing a research project right now on AI and culture, and one of the things we're talking about is personalizing. AI has the opportunity to personalize, so now we can take your response of not only giving us an answer, but giving us one that is set up in a way that's tailored to me.
you.
In which case, I'm going to probably believe it more than
The trust factor is there.
the trust.
Exactly.
So trust is a big deal here
Exactly.
in AI and pretty much every aspect we're going after.
Exactly.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Yes, I'd actually like just to add something there. I think that the biases that are inherent in a lot of these algorithms, I think, are pretty problematic. About 15 years ago, there was a whole push, all these self-learning firewalls, right? Hey, we see bad action, we're going to block that IP address. Well, the bad guys figured out that the firewalls were doing that. So they sent a bunch of malicious traffic, they spoofed the IP address source, and made it the root DNS servers. So what happened? People did a denial of service attack on themselves because we trusted the tool. We trusted the platform. Thankfully, they quickly realized that was a terrible idea. But the bad guys know how the algorithms work, and they're able to poison the data, and they're not going to be able to shift dramatically, but maybe they push a little bit, and the envelope of normal maybe gets a little wider, and then they have a window to get through. So I think we need to, that's where we need to push our vendors, and as a vendor, I encourage it. Push your vendors. What are you doing about this? How are you making sure that the biases are not there? And I think it's really important for people to think about those things.
I think that's a deep insight, really, with JSP where you started and Jeffrey where you took it. There's no perfect LLMs, right? LLMs are just algorithms trained by content that they ingested with maybe some feedback or not. And that's why you see the results from multiple LLMs vary differently. And that's where this whole issue of poisoning that supply chain is a real issue, be it with bias, be it with a specific attack on a specific company. Because if that somewhere in there, that issue came in, then you will get hallucination, or you will get directed hallucination. And then it's very easy to use something like that and provide the incorrect information. And it's still too early, but one can visualize 3 years from now, the interface that a human will have with their car will go through a LLM. And maybe you don't want to make that right turn then.
That's true. You might not want to make the right turn. So Fahim, what are you doing to help your team, your colleagues, not develop this overdependence on these kind of technology tools, like what JSB was mentioning?
I think it's always about some confluence of people, process, technology. Let's start with the process part of it. We are putting in multiple frameworks around really thoughtful use of AI itself. One is just an oversight in terms of grading each and every use case that we are going to engage with AI, understanding that use case and its impact. Does it have an impact on people? Does it have an impact on operations? Does it have an impact that's wide in magnitude? And then applying appropriate governance around it. And ethical AI is a real thing. And governance for ethical AI can only be done at a use case by use case level. I was studying the NIST AI risk framework guidelines, which is they're actually very good. A lot of times we blame people about detailed documents. I think they have a good view towards it, and it's really worth engaging with. And if you look at that, we have to understand what are we using AI for, but on the other hand, we have to really understand what's the genesis of this AI. The supply chain problem we discussed with Log4j, and I remember that day, that Saturday, which became multiple Saturdays.
As he smiles.
And now this issue comes in with any use of external LLM tools, and then the layerings and the data that comes in, and providing governance and process governance and the ability to back out of it when needed and be able to checkpoint it. These are all needed and important things.
So let's talk about the skills that our people on the team, because that seems to be a major theme here. JSB, why don't you start us out here? What investments are you seeing to upskill security teams so they work well with AI, and maybe even elaborate on how you're seeing AI changing this skill set of our people in ways that make just the general employee more secure?
Yeah, I'll actually share kind of within our own context at McKinsey for a solution that we deployed. It's a knowledge generation tool called Lily. And what it does is help our consultants essentially do a lot of research and document preparation, which is at the core of what we do. And what is interesting, there are lots of learnings from our journey with it, is that essentially if you looked at kind of the overall spend, for every dollar spent on kind of building the technology, about 3 of it went to what we call change management efforts, which include upskilling, training, driving adoption, right? Because to where you're going, Keri, we found that it is actually really, really important, not just to train people on here's the tool, here's how it might help you, but here's how you use it responsibly. Here's how do you validate that the output that it gives you is actually accurate and backed from a source that we trust. Here's how we think about writing a good prompt, right? So the skill set that you need to train both kind of the security teams, but also the actual users of the tool on how to use the tool responsibly is disproportionately kind of the effort that we're seeing organizations put to make sure this is used well.
Interesting. Fahim, I want to come back to you for a minute because you shared some of your ideas on the HR side of this also. You mentioned that you see AI changing what your cyber professionals do on a day-to-day basis, sort of along the line of what JSB was talking about. Can you elaborate on what you're seeing?
So the opportunity with AI is now not spend all the time just guarding the perimeter, but also understanding what's happening outside in the wide world. So we now have security teams that actually look at the dark web, really understand what information is out there that might be relevant and pertinent to us, But there's a lot of information out there. So to be able to actually sift through it, understand the actual knowledge from the noise, and then be able to apply and map it internally matters. And a lot of times, it's not just that we can get compromised. We work with hundreds of vendors, thousands of vendors. And if they are in our supply chain, and if they have a compromise, we have an impact to what we can provide and do for our customers. So in a way, we have to be vigilant and understand that whole ecosystem, and then understand what risks they might be facing, because they may not have as much resources or as many people available because maybe they are a tile manufacturer. But their supply chain impacts our supply chain.
So maybe as a tool for smaller, medium companies to supplement their security staff and practices. That's awesome. Yeah, Jeffrey, you want to weigh in here on the human factor side?
Yeah, so first I want to thank Fahim for doing a commercial for Black Kite. Thank you very much for that. I think there are a couple of things in addition to what my co-panelists have talked about. I think we hear a lot about AI putting people out of work, and I think it's very important for us to make sure our people understand that is not going to happen. In fact, it will give them an opportunity to focus on cooler, more interesting problems. So I think that's really, really critical because, the rank and file, they hear the buzz, but they're not involved in our conversations at the CIO level. So getting them to understand, we're bringing these tools in to help you be better at your jobs. I think that's really critical. And then both of my colleagues talked about getting people to understand, where is that data going, right? There have been a couple of stories, somebody from a bank uploaded a whole bunch of unpublished financial statements into ChatGPT's analysis engine. Well, you realize you just dumped all your proprietary financial data into an open store that everybody has access to, right? And I was talking actually with one of our esteemed colleagues at dinner last night about the fact that one of their folks uploaded some intellectual property, right? So thinking about those things and educating people, and then finally, we have to encourage people to push back and ask questions. I see this result, but that doesn't make sense based on my experience and what I have done and what I have learned. I'm actually watching a show called Killing Eve on Netflix, and one of the investigators said, you're looking at all the evidence because you already think you know the answer. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we need to push and we need to ask questions. Does that make sense? Does that align with what we know? We all have a lot of inherent knowledge. Trust that and use the tools to make it better and be more efficient and not have over-reliance, as JSP said.
Well, so we're really talking about a different skill set for our people. And then we want them to question the answers from the technology, not blindly use it. We want them to continue to do their job, but at the same time, think about the technology as a support or as a partner, not as doing their job for them. And that's really actually a very hard thing to do. Very hard to get people to not just blindly take the answers that they're getting out of the systems.
Well, I think that goes to the yesterday's discussion had here, which was, it's, I guess, the rise of liberal arts again. And it's really about now understanding how to frame and how to think and how to interpret rather than just how to do the coding of it.
Yeah, and that's a tall order for us to change the culture, I guess, of our organizations in some way. All right, I'm going to open this up for questions in just a minute, so get your questions ready. But before I do, I'd love for you guys to share with us what you're doing or telling your clients to do to be more secure in the AI world. And Fahim, maybe we'll start with you. What is your team doing or to prepare for this world about AI embedded in just about everything that we're doing today?
When we look at really internally as we develop capabilities, and for us, AI has been here for a long while. For instance, we built our own search engine. So if you go to homedepot.com and do a search, you're going to interact with a vector-based search engine. And why is that important? Because we actually went and tested and understood that just searching based on words coming to you is not enough. But now when we look at that and say, how do we extend that to actually provide knowledge and help to our associates and our customers, and how the humans and our customers interact with our website, we are now engaging in some very interesting programs and projects Some of them are also in alpha release now, and they deal with how to bring AI and Gen AI capabilities to help our customers achieve their dreams. Because people come to us either fix a problem or they have an aspiration. Yeah. If you can map that to a solution that we can provide, we believe Gen AI tools provide the right path towards it.
Yeah, I love that. I remember the paperclip guy. Now I'm showing my age. The little paperclip guy on Microsoft. If you didn't know the answer, you couldn't you couldn't write the question. You had to know exactly what question to ask to get the answer. Well, if you knew exactly what question to ask, you didn't need the help to tell you how to answer the question. So I love that you're digging deeper sort of in the search, because I do see people come to Home Depot with a vision for changing their living room, and they may not know exactly what they need to search for, what to look for. Makes a lot of sense. All right, JSB, what are you seeing your clients doing to prepare for this new AI world?
I actually think a big part of it is making sure you have the right risk framework and governance structure in place. I will tell you, we see horror stories where organizations are deploying tools and not really thinking about what are the new risk categories that exist, right? So as I'm thinking about IP infringement, data privacy, right, biases, all of this needs to be kind of assessed holistically, and then the organization needs to understand what are the controls I have in place to kind of mitigate that risk. Am I comfortable with it relative to the value, right? Whatever this capability or function, to Jeff's point, is being delivered, and step into that eyes wide open, right? We started the conversation, Jeff and I were talking about, it is a seemingly like buzzword. There is a ton of opportunity. I think it is all clear that there's value there, but making sure you step into it, understanding what risks these use cases or these tools can pose in the environment on a use case by use case is actually quite important. So you evolve the risk framework to do so holistically.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you have an example of a use case that would, or maybe two, that would have different impacts on how to bring in AI? Maybe some specific examples?
Yeah, so I don't like picking on vendors like Fahim.
He's allowed.
I'm a customer.
Just being agnostic, right? So think of kind of the Microsoft suite, right, of tools. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of value that can be generated. A lot of folks are using Teams or SharePoint or whatever the case may be. And you may have kind of different co-pilot products, be it on the developer side or be it for the workforce in general. Well, if your SharePoint documents don't have the right user access control, then the files from legal that have sensitive contract data, or the files from the finance team that have your financials, can now be publicly accessed, right? And depending on how that is deployed, you now have, somebody who should not have that level of access, have access to sensitive information, which can be used internally or externally, right? To Jeff's example. So it's a matter of looking at the capability. I'm not picking on Microsoft, right? This is reliant on the organizational's user and access control. So if you have gaps, it's going to exacerbate that.
Makes sense. Okay, Jeff, what do you see as the best way for our audience, mostly CIOs, C-level tech execs, to move forward in this space?
So JSB stole my governance thunder, so, but I think that's quite all right. I think there are really a couple of things. I think number one, governance, which we talked about. I think a policy. How many of you have a policy around use of AI in your organization, right? And I won't actually ask that question, but I would venture to guess it is significantly less than half, right? Because that's what we see. I think the second thing is we need to get ahead of this. We need to get in front of our boards and get in front of our C-level colleagues and, number one, ask them what their expectations are, what their plans are, and then also help them understand and kind of level set. As we've all talked about, there's a level of immaturity in a lot of these capabilities, but they're being shoved down our throats. So having real expectations, and then, JSB hit it. We had our customer advisory board last month, and we talked about AI, and the biggest problem that people came up with was around identity and access management. Because we're taking all this data, we're mashing it together, and we're uploading it into this LLM, and as we know from the past, Yahoo released a ton of data to researchers a bunch of years ago, and it turns out it is virtually impossible to fully de-anonymize data, no matter how hard you try. And we talked about the attackers. The attackers are using the same algorithms and the same mechanisms to de-anonymize the data, or to get through that de-anonymization. I said that without fumbling, that was good, right? So being able to understand how they're going after it and understand they're coming after our data, they want your data. And we need to figure out, are we putting the data in places where we are comfortable about how it is being protected? But I think
I want
policy
to follow
and
up on
procedure-
that.
Yes.
I think it's important that when enterprises look at utilizing LLMs, we actually have instituted an architecture where we are using RAG frameworks that isolate our content from the LLMs. And then there's RBAC on those RAGs so that the knowledge can be stratified and can be contained. And honestly, if you just use a RAG and throw a bunch of information, just use the information and just throw it directly at an LLM, it will not have contextualized your organization or your user or your person. I believe CIOs should really look at that investment in those pipelines for isolation of knowledge and information and individuals from the utilization of the LLMs. I look at the LLMs as an oracle. And the way we are writing our code, you can switch between one or the other on demand. And that's something that's important, that investment is made.
All right, who has a question for our panel? Yes, right up here. We have a microphone running up to you. And then do we have a second microphone? We can give it to this participant on the 2 tables behind her. Go ahead, yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Mick Ross from Ashwin. I would like to know, as AI is just maybe almost everywhere in future in your supply chain, so do you have any answers or good recommendations how to track and trace your vendors and supplier, what kind of AI is in their products, and as well as the criteria like is it trustworthy, explainable, so that you can go to a risk assessment on the products and services?
So somebody have an opinion on that?
I have a lot of opinions.
I know that,
I
Jeffrey,
think-
but we want to hear some of them.
I think part of the challenge is there's this like abstraction about what people are doing with the tools. So I think a lot of it is we need to start asking questions. Are you using it? How are you using it? Why are you using it? As opposed to just because. And I think the EU just passed a new AI set of rules, I guess. I have not done a deep dive, but they tend to be pretty well thought out. And Fahim mentioned the new NIST framework. So I think pushing our partners to adhere to those frameworks, right? What are you doing? What's your governance? What's your policy? I think right now that's the best we can do, is asking questions, because it's all over the place and it's moving so fast.
I was going to add, our group, CAMS, is running our Cybersecurity Symposium tomorrow. And one of the topics is what we're calling AI bombs. So Stuart talked about software bill of materials. We're beginning to see that bill of materials concept permeate data. What's the source of the data? Where did it come from? And tomorrow we're going to talk with a couple of experts on AI. So we understand how the AI systems were built and what's in the AI and what does a bomb look like for AI. So thank you for asking your question. There was a young lady over here. Yes, do you have the microphone? Okay, and then Irving after you. We'll start with her and then we'll go to Irving. Go ahead, and then we'll get you guys next round. Go ahead, yes.
Thank you. Very insightful discussion. And today, you've a very imminent topic, facing cybersecurity threats from the consequences of AI. I was wondering if you have use cases where you've used AI for enhancing your threat intelligence, enhancing your cybersecurity. That's my question.
Fahim, have you used AI to enhance threat detection?
So as I shared earlier, now we are able to understand endpoint, user, server, and network behaviors in terms of what's normal, and that's all machine learning based, and then be able to resolve and react to that.
Awesome. Let's get Irving's question and then we'll conclude. Go ahead, Irving.
So, Keri, we've been developing software, mission-critical software, let me say, since at least the 1960s. And part of developing software has been learning how to test it and how to make sure it works, how to make sure it's safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are at a level of complexity of the systems that is much, much bigger than anything we've seen before, especially if you add now the role of data. And a question, I think, is, I don't think we have any idea how to test it. So at some level, this is like rebuilding the world's transactional systems, that credit cards and so on, using it, but we don't know how to test it, so therefore we haven't rebuilt it. Or the FAA systems, air traffic control systems. And so this is all intertwined with how do we test the damn things? And by the way, when we say, oh, it's a hallucination, I would say that's a bug. That's a hallucination is a bug. When an airplane fails.
Irving, are you asking us about how we are testing AI systems?
Or how do we learn to test
How do we
these
learn to test?
super-duper?
Somebody want to comment on that?
We keep our software, you'll have to isolate, and loose coupling still works. And you'll have to understand the behavior of the individual components before the behavior of the whole system. And in that testing, things can work, but they may not work to the efficacy that you want them to work. So for instance, when you test an upgrade on a search engine itself, there's always experimentation, A versus B. What yields the results that we are looking at them to yield? And there won't be it works or it doesn't work. It will be, does it work to the efficacy that you want it to work to?
Awesome. Okay, we have 45 seconds left. So I'm going to ask each of my panelists to give us one thing that you want this audience to leave with from our discussion today. You get 15 seconds to tell us one thing. So Jeffrey, you want to start us out?
Don't be afraid. This is a tool and an opportunity, and we should not allow all of the paranoid security people like me to tell you that this is the end of the world, because it is not.
Okay, awesome. Be courageous. JSP?
It's a multi-factor process to address unknown risks, but it is a process that we can put in place.
Awesome. It's a process, so there's hope there. Awesome. Fahim, what's one thing you want people to take home from the discussion today?
Engage actively, but don't burn yourself.
Engage actively, but don't burn yourself. All right. So we talked about security, AI as a security tool, AI built into our supply chain, AI as something the bad guys have access to. Lots to discuss more. Stay tuned. I'm sure there are other, well, I know I have a session this afternoon with Andrew Stanley, who's the CISO at Mars, the candy and pet food company, to talk about more AI and bringing AI into the organization. And I know there are several other panels today about that. So thank you guys. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
My panel.